There was one of the operator's main measures of controlling the reactor's neutron flux were not working. Maybe, at that moment, they still had hope to somehow get the situation under control. The sad truth was that they didn't have any means of doing so anymore. Hello guys. Today we're going slightly back on the Chernobyl disaster timeline. Recently we released 4 episodes about the brave firefighters, and despite mentioning power plant operators, we didn't disclose any details about them, what they did or what happened to them. It's time to change it. The moments when firefighters were rushing towards the Chernobyl nuclear power plant were tense, but at the same time, the operators were already on site, after all. They tried to reduce the disaster effects, and some of them had given up their lives to do so. Operators and firefighters met at least a few times within the first hours after the event happened. That's why you shouldn't be surprised if you will hear the same names you learned from the previous episodes. This episode starts the twin miniseries of the firefighters and will be completely dedicated to the Chernobyl operators. Their story, their lives, their work, and their role in these tragic events. Sit comfortably and enjoy this video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments after watching the whole episode. Let's start. Chernobyl Operators, Part 1. The first moments. In April 1986, there were 4 operational reactors, from 1 to 4, and 2 under construction, number 5 and 6. Every reactor had its own building, as they were constructed separately, and the whole RBMK project was designed to be modular and scalable. First of all, that approach reduced the cost of constructing the whole power plant. Starting one reactor after another allowed the production of the power on site. Thus, before finishing the power plant project completely, the so highly needed electricity was already produced for months, as the plan demanded, or years, as it was in reality. So when the first reactor was being commissioned, the next 3 ones were still under construction, at a different stage of completion. Thanks to this, the Soviets didn't need to wait additional years to start producing the power. The timeline of this episode is the first seconds and minutes after the RBMK reactor number 4 exploded. Its building was hugely damaged, yet the others were harmed too. Not so much, of course, but the threat was still there. For example, the fires could easily spread between the destroyed Unit 4 and Unit 3, which was why the firefighters had to fight not only the source of the disaster, but also the smaller dangers, like the fires and debris on the roofs of Unit 3. Every unit was somewhat independent. Despite a significant part of employees knowing the work schedule and the buildings very well, the regular staff was not rotated on a daily basis. The work was pretty much the same with every RBMK reactor, maintain the balance of the fission reaction inside it. But some of the reactors were still under the testing phase, and some, like the infamous Unit 4, were yet to be officially commissioned. Despite practically every senior specialist could work with every unit in Chernobyl, there was little communication between the teams. Most of the information flow was happening either after work, like between friends during dinner on some free day, or when meeting somewhere in the power plant. You can call it a kind of gossiping, as the whole Pripyat city and Chernobyl plant were under heavy supervision by almost every security agency in the USSR, like the KGB for example. That's why when the explosion happened, not many employees of the power plant could at least narrow the source of it. They didn't know or didn't suspect it could be a test gone wrong. On that fateful night, on April 26, 1986, moments after the explosion of the RBMK number 4 happened, the Unit 4 control room was full of noise. The machinery and control equipment was buzzing and flashing, as well as the operators were shouting all at once. Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, the test supervisor during that night, was struggling to understand what exactly happened and what the instruments were actually saying. It might sound odd, but I want to remind you that any experienced power plant operator at that time was very suspicious of these instruments. They were usually not reliable, and a significant part of the controlling work was done with trained intuition, handwritten calculations and notes, rather than purely relying on operating machinery. A whole wall of warning lamps were flashing red and yellow. All across the whole room, the consoles of the turbine, reactor, and pump desks were buzzing with terrifying electric alarms. They went off all at once, instantly. Maybe they weren't especially precise, but not to this extent. Everything indicated that something extremely wrong happened. Senior Unit Control Engineer Boris Stolyarchuk was terrified of the readings from his desk. If he was to believe them, all 8 main safety valves were open. That was one of the bad news. The second, more unbelievable and dangerous, was that no water remained in the separators. To understand why Stolyarchuk was petrified by this was that these readings indicated the maximum design basis accident. We don't know for sure if he knew about the design flaws back then, but in 2018 he was interviewed by Sonia Koshkina from the Kishkina project. During this interview, he pointed out that Dyatlov and others were trialed because all guilt was attributed to them. In 2018, he said that the disaster was not caused by the operator's actions, but rather because of the RBMK imperfect structure. Of course, one might suspect he would defend himself, as he was present in the control room too, after all, but all documents and testimonies confirm that the RBMK design flaws were a major cause of the disaster. The operator's role was important too, but without the faulty design, there would be no Chernobyl event. Regardless of Stolyarchuk's possible knowledge of the faulty RBMK design, he knew that the lack of thousands of liters of coolant inside the reactor was an imminent threat of a huge magnitude. It could result in a core meltdown, which would be disastrous. Yet, at that moment, he probably didn't anticipate that the reactor was beyond the point of repair. It was gone. Another important and fairly well-known persona was a senior reactor control engineer Toptunov. His control panel indicated that the control rods had stopped not even halfway through their descent. This was shown by the needles on the dials of the sails and gauges, which were stuck at the 4-meter mark. Despite the operators releasing the control rods from additional safety measures, the electromagnetic clutches, the gravity couldn't do its work. It didn't take the released rods all the way to their stops. This meant the rods, one of the operator's main measures of controlling the reactor's neutron flux, were not working, and they should be inserted fully into the core to shut it down. That was the purpose of the AZ5 button. Other things were disturbing too. The glowing grey numbers on the reactimeter showed the activity in the core was going up and down. Something was still going on in there, but no one in the control room had any idea what or why. Maybe, at that moment, they still had hope to somehow get the situation under control. The sad truth was that they didn't have any means of doing so anymore. Yet again, we're getting back to one of the most important conclusions about the whole Chernobyl disaster. I like to remind all of you that the operators were not fully responsible for this event. Some would argue that they were not responsible at all. Opinions vary, yet today it's accepted that the most important part of the disaster was the RBMK design. We discussed it in a whole 12-episode miniseries on our channel, so check them out later. Whether the operators pushed the reactor to the brink of destruction, as HBO's Legasov said during the trial scene, or they didn't, all of these tragic events would have not happened if the reactor had been designed well. Lack of resources, poor project management, and corruption were the systematic cause of the Chernobyl disaster. People who found themselves in the middle of it were the same victims as any others experienced by the outcome of the Chernobyl event. This was the first episode of the Operator's History miniseries, so treat it like a kind of introduction. Check out our Chernobylite game if you haven't done so yet, and watch other videos on our channel if you're interested in Chernobyl disaster story. Thanks for watching, guys. That's it for today. Take care, stay safe, and see you next week.